It is the PGA RotoBaller show going on over here for the Genesis Invitational down in California. We got my main man, Spencer Aguiar, alongside me, the model maniac, about to break down this bad boy signature event golf tournament full of studs, full of Tiger Woods, Sunday Red, coming out with the fossil-looking logo. We got a whole lot of stuff going on, Spence. Where is your mind?
Well, definitely a late start to the week. Got caught up in the Super Bowl game, as most people did. Very, very interesting game. Don't know what San Francisco was doing there at the end. So many mistakes. I think the biggest one was probably when you have that 2nd and 5 in the fourth quarter at the end of the game there. I don't know why you don't just run McCaffrey, pick up the first down, kneel it, kick the field goal, win the Super Bowl. It's all over. You don't give Mahomes the ball back. We should learn at this point, if you give Mahomes the ball back with any amount of time, you're going to end up losing. And if you give it to him back with 2 minutes left on the clock nearly, you're going to definitely lose in some way. So I know there's been a lot of discussion, and this is not a football show, but there's been a lot of discussion on San Francisco taking the ball in overtime. I don't know. I haven't run a mathematical equation on it. I just cannot imagine that that's the right decision at the end of the day. What was going to happen, and I would have assumed this from the start, is even if you score a touchdown, Mahomes is going to see that. He's going to then score a touchdown. They're going to go for 2. They're going to win the game. You're still not getting the ball back that way. But I think if very quickly, I'd like to move into the golf just to talk on this Jonathan Vegas thing, and then I'll let you talk on the football if you have anything to say there, Byron. But what has been going on this season on the 18th hole? I have now lost 3 or 4 bets where my player bogeys 18 to drop out of the placement bet. It's the weirdest thing right now.
Hole 18 is cursed. It's just how it's going
much
right now. But you know what, Spence? It's like what we've had 6 tournaments now. The Devil's number 6. It's behind us. We've had 6 tournaments, 6 triple-digit winners. You've been on one of them. This is it now. It's Riv time. I think it's out. We've said this about the Farmers, but that wasn't a signature event. The Farmers was a golf course that could separate the boys from the men from the boys. This is the same situation. A lot better golfers in this field. Not golfers like Xander Schauffele, Max Homa, Cantley that really aren't playing good golf right now, all things said. Xander, fine, whatever. We can get to all these guys here shortly, but we've had these random outliers on courses that typically have had better fields. I know I'm just kind of keep going back to the Farmers. And then we had a signature event that had only 3 days, which, we benefited from quite heavily. But at the same time, the result was still a triple-digit winner. So that's kind of just how things are going. And I think we're going to speak about Ludwig this week too, who I'm pretty sure you're going to be quite high on, where I'm still kind of in the mood to see what happens with him. So there's a lot of fun stuff, lots of different narratives going on. Scotty Scheffler enters this tournament for the first time since in the last 1,000 days without having won the event before. So he's got a totally different kind of outlook on the week. There's a lot going on. I don't know, is there a narrative or any sort of kind of idea that you kind of leaning into this week based off of what we've dealt with the last 6 weeks?
I think you kind of said it best, Byron. When we look at these tournaments and what's happened with them over the start of the season, you have 2, 3, 4 big name players in the field. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what your outright card has been, if they don't produce, it's kind of the sentiment that we've given over and over again, that it just opens up the field for everybody else at tournaments where they're birdie fests for the most part at the end of the day. This is not that type of venue at Riviera. You're going to end up getting 72.7% of your shots, your second shots that occur from 150 plus. It's 11.8% increase that you're also going to get from 150 to 200. You have the Kikuyu grass in the rough that's going to make it sticky. I know there's been some rain in the area. Maybe that makes this a little bit of a softer course, but you have all the best players who are on the PGA Tour in this event. We've gone 6 for 6 right now of winners 100 to 1 or over. I would be shocked if this continued this week. This feels like where we're going to get a top end winner here.
Yes, that's what I need to hear, Spencer. I would be shocked too. The thing is the men are separate from the boys in particular, like you said, from 150 to 200. That's not 100 to 150 where anybody can just get hot with a wedge. That's a very specific range of approach play that's got a 7-iron, a 6-iron, a bit of a 5-iron, depending on how long you hit the golf ball. Those are harder clubs to hit than a pitching wedge. So the good ball strikers are definitely going to separate themselves. We're going to have seen. I see Myron in the chat. You're asking about guys that may or may not have played at the Waste Management Phoenix Open. There's hecklers. I don't think that's going to be a thing. I know we saw a few extra videos and things like that of Zach Johnson and Billy Horschel and Benny On airing their grievances, but there's just a few people that are just yelling random absurdities out there. I think people that want to be in that environment will go back to that environment. Others won't. I think what's more important is the fact that it was cold as balls, rainy as balls, and those kind of conditions can sap your mental energy. You could just see Sahith was just, he didn't have the juice he had earlier in the week. He depleted his energy banks, like going into a week like that, you don't play for a full day, then you play 27 holes the next, just a disaster. God damn it. Can we just get 18 by 4 this week? Like, give me a model tournament, please. Just give us some like redundant stuff. Like, give us some normality. So we're going to have to see how that works out. And I think this is the golf course to do it. The patrons are going to be fine. The course is going to handle everybody cool. And we've got a big boy field, Spence. So I know a few stats you mentioned there on approach. I think we need to mention, are you leaning into distance versus accuracy off the tee a little bit more this week?
I had a 62-38 split of distance over accuracy. To me, though, like, that is not an answer that it's all one way or another. I think it's why a guy like Colin Morikawa can find success here. But I do think if you make me choose between the two, and when I model it historically, specifically the last couple of years, there does seem to be an increase in driving distance that's going to come into play. But I wouldn't get so carried away with that answer to where I'm running, a separate category for driving distance, for example. Like I run things in a much tighter ship the way that I do it. Like, I condense a lot of stats into one, and I usually have 6 or 7 overlying categories that build my model. But inside of those categories, there's a million different things that go into it. So that's where the distance does come into play over and over again there, but it's at a very minimal split to where it's not going to remove a guy like Morikawa or somebody like that if they have the proximity I'm looking for. And I really think one of the interesting things, and I haven't necessarily, I don't listen to many podcasts, if any, on the golf side of the equation here. But I have not seen it on Twitter of anybody mention this. I don't think that it's that difficult around the green. Like, I know that you have the around the green and you have the undulation that we're talking about, but if you look historically at the data, it's pretty easy to salvage a lot of these spots. Like, for me, one of the more difficult situations is the extensive deep bunkering that they have. If a guy can salvage a score from inside the bunker, that meant a ton to me if he also had the GIR percentage that was going to be high, and if he had the weighted proximity from 150 plus that he could add to, and if he was a quality total driver. So there are certain people on my outright card this week. Like I mentioned Morikawa, he's not one of those names, did highly consider him, but I do think that there are names in that mold that you can consider that are maybe not the greatest around the green players for that reason. And one of those examples for me, and I guess I'll start early just with the name here. I really like Victor Hovland this week, Byron.
I can see it, Spence. And I think Victor Hovland's sitting at a casual 14-1 at a golf course he's played at well in the past. The thing with him, though, is there's this uncertainty. And I know that someone that runs their models at a longer baseline for you, that's probably why you're probably into him a bit more than I think what everyone else typically does. The recent form lacking, but the baseline stuff, amazing. And I think Victor's just overall ball striking is just going to overpower this golf course if we get the Victor Hovland that we typically see here. And he's putted really well on this golf course too. I think there was that one year he just made every single putt he kind of looked at when his chipping was still pretty shoddy. I'm expecting that chipping to get better. So we'll see what cooks. And I think his approach play can be attributed to the fact that there was lots of wedges out of the fairway. Like Victor Hovland is a good long iron player out of the rough. Like that's where he's elite, which surprise, surprise, this golf course is going to reward that a lot more than Pebble, where he kind of struggle, on approach. So I'm curious as to your take on why you like Victor the most.
Well,
or a lot.
I probably do like him the most. I mean, if we're talking pure win equity, the most likely person to win this golf tournament is Scotty Scheffler. If you're running a model that says otherwise, I think you're doing something wrong at that point. But I think when we look at the price tag, and there was a 15-1 where it opened up, and there's some boosts that you can do. I know some people boosted him into the 20s on DraftKings, and I think that's a real route to consider this week. But I kind of just think that when you look at what he did at Pebble Beach in that 58th place finish, I'm not so sure it was quite as bad as it actually looks on paper. Like, really where the problem came into play there is he underperforms massively. I understand that. But then he withdraws from a tournament and kind of sense, I don't know, skepticism with his game, and the live concerns all of a sudden entered the mix. So it was a very public thing that came into play for him. And when I ran my model, one of the things I look at, it doesn't run as a weight in my model. I do like to look at par or better streaks. There's some courses that are more challenging than others. But Hovland ranks third in my model with 18 consecutive rounds of shooting par or better. So while the finish at Pebble Beach wasn't exactly what you wanted to see, there's just a bunch of even par rounds that never really got out of the quicksand there. And I don't think the game is as far off as it may appear. And for a golfer like him, he takes a week off. He does some practice. He fixes up some of the mistakes. There's only 3 players in my model that ranked inside the top 6 for weighted proximity from 150 plus and weighted total driving. One is Scotty Scheffler. One is Victor Hovland. The other one's Cameron Young. Of those players, the only one inside of my model, inside the top 20 for sand safe percentage, would be Victor Hovland. So I think that that's where the short game can help him a little bit. You have nearly a 70% GIR rate. I do think the conditions are going to be a little bit softer this week than we normally get. And if my one concern of his around the green game at least gets somewhat mitigated here, maybe not entirely, but at least somewhat mitigated, if I believe he can save some strokes from inside the bunkers, all of a sudden, in my opinion, now all of a sudden we've gotten a boosted price on him to where if he performs at Pebble, he's 8, 9, 10-1 in this field. And now he's 14, 15-1. I thought there was real value to consider in that price. And for DraftKings, there may be some leverage that can get created on him.
Yeah, we can dive into some DraftKings, Jan, in a little bit. I think I do want to kind of just bounce my outright that I have for the week off you and just see what your thoughts are. Because last week I left a bit on the table, leaving some, budget for Justin Thomas in case he drifted to like a 30 or 40 early in the week. Did not happen. He just kind of was lackluster outside the top 10 the entire week. It felt like it didn't ever pull. Lost a bet for him for top 10 there. If he just made one more birdie in the final round, we would have been golden. It is what it is. We still had a good week. Finally, things coming together for us in the breaking 100 scene there. So this week, I kind of am leaning about 6.25 to 6 on rate of return, which is not typically my kind of avenue, but I'm kind of going into it with Scotty Scheffler this week. I think where I'm leaning is the fact that he suits his golf course to a T. If you think about Augusta's comps, we've seen, I think I saw a tweet out there that so many live golfers used to win this tournament. And guess what? All those live golfers have won Augusta. That's the reason why those guys are there, is because they're always going to be going back to Augusta because they've won that tournament. What do you need in order to play that tournament? Ball striking tee to green. I think I pulled up here last year's leaderboard from a strokes gained perspective. The strokes gained tee to green had pretty much 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the top 10 golfers sitting inside the top 12. So we got strokes gained tee to green through the roof. If you take a look at the strokes gained putting, 35th, 24th, 32nd, 37th, 59th, 49th, all sitting inside the top 10 for the week, putting wise. So to me, that was like Morse code saying, Scotty Scheffler, like, boop, 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 like, here we go. Like, it's go time. Cringe factory, whatever, Morse code there, but it's go time with him. I think the putting, he's typically putted well yet too. If you take a look at the last 8 rounds, he's played nicely. And the most important thing for me is I think he went into the week last week expected, not himself expecting. I think he's trying to win every tournament. But people were expecting him to win it for the 3rd time. That's a lot of pressure. It's been done by Steve Stricker ages ago. This week is the first time he's coming into the tournament that he hasn't had to have media obligations for the Waste Management Phoenix Open. It's the first time he's not just having won a tournament. Tiger Woods is back. Rory's back. Max Homer's going to be in town. He is under the radar as much as the world number 1 golfer in the world can be. And to me, that's when Scotty Scheffler's in his sniper outfit. I think he's going to come rocking and rolling. And from a long-term ball striking perspective, he's the best from 150 to 200. So that's just how I'm going to rock and roll here, because that's what I'm looking for. That's where the most of the iron play comes from. That's where most of the driving comes from. Scotty Scheffler's my guy. I think he won the Players without gaining any strokes putting. He's a good enough ball striker to do it. You just need a course that allows him to do that. This golf course allows him to do that. So I'm kind of curious as onto your take as of what your take for Scotty Scheffler is this week.
I mean, don't look now. He's gained strokes in back-to-back tournaments with the putter. So if that's where we're trending, and really, I would say the only thing that's held him back ever so slightly has been the around the green game. Maybe I worry a little bit about his bunker play, but like if he's going to continue to gain strokes putting, the win is coming at any moment. So he's the deserving favorite, as I said at the beginning. It comes down to me. I think one of the big names wins this event. I think it comes down to how do you want to distribute your units out? Is it a one-man or virtually a one-man Scotty card? Or in my case, I took two routes with Hovland and one other name, but I mean, it's very close. I'm not going to tell anybody that bets one bullet on Scotty Scheffler that's not the route to go. I think it's a fair price also. Like, I don't know exactly what you got it at, but like 7.5 to 1, like those are fair numbers.
Yeah, I bet it at 7.5 to 1 at Bet365, and I bet half my stake there, and I took my other half and I took it to DraftKings, and I got it at 965 or 975. So personally, I'm doing a bit better than the 750. I'll be putting that in my article for everyone to do. Anyone that's going to be betting is most likely only laying the amounts that I am anyway. So it's fair to say that the boost can help you there, but we're not trying to take advantage of boosts to try and win you. I place it at 750. That's the number it is. And I dived in at like a 40 to 1 on a rogue guy we'll get to down the board, whose numbers since plummeted. And unfortunately that's the case, but seems like I'm catching a lot of closing line value lately, and it's just not really helping. It is what it is. Sam Burns, Seth Theegala, you guys are my boys. I was looking to go back to those kind of three guys in that range where I wanted to go Burns, Theegala, Cameron Young, like that kind of range, and just pepper that 30 to 1 range and see what I could do. But gosh darn it, I think Sahith had his chance last week, and I think it's going to he comes and goes. I don't think he kind of peppers top fives like he does nonstop. He comes and goes. He gets hot. He gets cold. I think we caught him when his odds drifted nicely. He was 50 to 1 to win last week, and now he's 35 in a signature event this week. So like the odds to me just didn't seem like they were fair for him. But we'll see. Is there any other names, Spence, down in the 20s, down in the 30s that you kind of had your eye on? I know you mentioned you got another name. I don't know if you want to mention it or not, but let's hear it.
So I went down one of the forbidden routes that I would say that there's two things that kind of trip me up sometimes. One would be Rory at the Masters. I can't seem to avoid that every single year. The other one is any single time Cantlay drifts above 20 to 1. Yeah. I start to think that there's value in the number again. There was a 22 to 1 when the market opened on Monday at a specific book out there. I don't think it's there anymore on Bet Online, but if you shop around, the last I looked, you could still find a 1920 out there. Obviously, you talked about the ability to boost depending on what your exact units are that you're putting into play dollar-wise there. I just think there's a lot to like about Cantlay in California, to where there's almost this public perception about him at this point, and maybe this is more of a DraftKings answer than anything else, that he has been the most frustrating golfer for every single person who's backed him. And a lot of those answers have come from people who have backed him in the outright market at these 11, 12, 13, 14 to 1 numbers. And that's a lot of exposure that adds up. And unfortunately, when you have the heightened exposure and you watch Cantlay come nowhere near the leaderboard and it never comes in contention, it leaves a sour taste in your mouth. And I think we've almost reached that narrative right now with Cantlay, to where I don't think there's a massive difference between Cantlay and Xander for the most part on any given board. My general thing when I would look would be which guy of the two was the higher price guy when you got them into the 20s. All of a sudden, Xander's going to be one of the favorites still. You haven't gotten that correction. And look, I don't know with Xander. I mean, Xander also pulled out of the tournament citing much worse problems than what Hovland was citing. I'd rather just have some bad game like if your game
Then,
trending,
yeah.
then a risk problem potentially. So it's at least worth noting on Xander there. My model likes him fine, but I think there's very intriguing upside to consider with Cantlay. And I also think both of the answers that we've just given, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be in those players, whether it's the Gall or Cantlay on the positives and the negatives there. I think that heightens kind of what we're trying to discuss every single week when it comes to value. You get certain players where the perception of them goes the other direction, good or bad. And I am looking for the value when it drops to the point where the price becomes too large. And a guy like the Gala, when you see them in contention and all of a sudden they boost themselves up the leaderboard, the sports books also see that happen. And now all of a sudden you've lost all the value in the play. So you have to be, it's almost a game of chess where while you are trying to find the golfers that you think are going to win, at the end of the day, you have to do it where there's actual value in the number. And I've always been a massive believer when I've built my models that as soon as the sports books see something come into play that you are not, or that you've already seen and they have seen, you've lost all the value at that point. So I think the Gall is one of the prime examples of that. My model likes him fine for upside. It doesn't like him at that price. This is a completely different wager if he's 60 to 1 versus the 30s that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think at 8,600, he's going to be a totally okay DFS player, depending on ownership. I think that's probably the route to go. I think he's still affordable in that price range versus you take a look at all the other odds around him. We're seeing some interesting correlations between, outright market and the DraftKings pricing. So we'll have to dive into that here shortly. But one thing I did want to touch on, Spence, is Max Homa and the myth or the logic of course history versus recent form. Is someone immune to playing bad golf at a certain golf course just because they can raise their baseline magically, like Bubba Watson does, like Max Homa does, like Hideki? Ian, if you're watching, cheers, Tom Kim, baby, woo woo. What a crazy Sunday that was. Tom Kim coming up the board and Hideki doing Hideki things. I think Hideki finished outside the top 20 again. With an eagle and a streak on the back nine. That's what he had to do to finish 21st. So Hideki, to me, I don't know, man. He's fighting some demons, that guy. But we'll have to see. Maybe a course like this suits him a bit more than last week again. But to get back to Max, Spence, I think Max's backbone of his game has always been the putter. And it's been a bit of a bugaboo to start the year. And when someone's elite aspect of their game profile leaves them, I'm tending to kind of go in the direction away from them, even though the course history is like overwhelmingly good. Do you agree?
I think regardless of who the golfer is, that would be my exact answer that I would give. Course history matters. I understand that. And I always get caught here saying that, like, I'm so anti-course history in a lot of these discussions. I understand that it matters, but there's more that comes into the mix than just course history. I want golfers that, yes, you have good course history, but can you show me statistically why you have that good course history? Can you show me on your recent form that you're actually producing in the numbers where it matters to roll that over into a tournament like this? I worry a little bit that the public sentiment around Homa is just so high at this event that he almost gets priced in a way to where in head-to-head matchups, and think like Hovland versus Homa is a really prime example of that. And unfortunately, that number got ballooned up over at BetOnline. I think it's in the minus 130s now for Hovland, but that's the exact.
Did you bet it again, Spence? Are you messing up the markets for us?
I did bet. Unfortunately, I didn't get that one out for any of the RotoBaller people by the time it moved, but that was one of the first wagers I punched a ticket on. And that's one of the things. It's where, I'm curious to see if there's other books out there that maybe provide a little bit of a different price. And I would think that there's usually some copycat places out there that will give you like a 115 or 120, and there might be some value in that number at that point. But I'm always about fading the course history narrative. And if it burns you, it burns you. Like, I wouldn't say that this guy had great course history. I understand that he came in second last year, but like if you look at Nick Taylor had the second and a bunch of missed cuts, and everybody I kind of tend to think jumped on him because of that second place where he gained a ton of strokes and probably should have won the event. And my model saw it the opposite way, unfortunately. And I faded him in a lot of spots and it burnt me. And that's where like the bad of it comes into play. But I think here with Homo, now we're talking about a high-end golfer where there is a lot of public intrigue at this particular venue. And I'm just going to always be out in those situations.
Yeah. I think in particularly from a DFS perspective, because I think he's going to catch so much steam sitting south of 10K, south of Victor Hovland, south of Xander Schauffele. I think we've got some course history thoroughbreds with Morikawa and Max Homa sitting in the upper nines there as the first 2 9K options. I think I won't be surprised if people are starting their lineups Victor, Colin, Max. That's just the California kids, that narrative going that way. Someone I do also want to get your take on, Spence, is Ludwig, because I want to tell you what my kind of opinion on this guy is. Starting now, I'm kind of at 20-1. I'm not looking to be early on Ludwig. I want him to prove me wrong about my take on him and my assessment on him. I know everyone was like saying going into the weekend, he was second at Pebble, and he would have probably won that tournament if there was a 4th round of golf. I don't know what the future held, but what I do know is Ludwig, just from watching, he seems real nervy when the moment's the brightest. Like, I know the Ryder Cup is probably one of the most pressure-packed situations in the world. He had the perfect, like Luke Donald just did such a masterful job putting him with Victor. That settled him down. Victor chipped his brains off. Like, he was chipping in on the greens. Like, the first few holes, like that trio hit the flag, I think 3 times in the first 4 holes. It was just like a weird start to the week. But then when he got up on, I think it was Colin and somebody else, Ludwig had these putts to end the tournament, end the match. It was Dormy. And he just had these putt after putt that he just kept missing, like layup putts. When he just needed to do it, like he couldn't have lost the match, but it was Dormy, could have gone to the end. He just didn't do it. He won the RSM, yes, I get that, and went berserk. He won a golf tournament on the PGA Tour. I'm fine with that. I'm just waiting to see what this guy does. He luck boxed his way to the top of the leaderboard in round 2 at the Pebble Beach thing. Like, did you see how he was putting? Like, balls coming in from everywhere, So it's just a weird thing. I know this course is a bit better suited for him, which I'm kind of nervous about, but it's a big boy field again. I'm curious to see how he handles himself. So I'm kind of interested on your take. I'm going to play the wait and see game. I think he's going to be ultra popular. I just want to see what he does when he finds himself in a crunch time. What can you show me right now?
So I think my model likes him more than yours does on a week by week basis. I think like we had this discussion last week, even talking about a season long contest of, is it Oberg or is it Homa that you like better in these spots? And you said Homa, I said Oberg, which, by the way, how many times can we change his name at this point? Like,
God. It's that meme, Spence, where the guy's brain gets like bigger and bigger and he just gets better and better as you change his name. Like at Ludwig, what is he now? Oberg?
I think it's Oberg, but I mean, I don't even know that that's correct at this point. We've changed it so many times.
Let's call him Luddy.
Yeah. I don't know though if I actually believe that this is a better course fit for him. Distance-wise, yes. I worry a little bit that the challenge of this venue could bite him a little bit. There are some red flags, and not over the top red flags with it. I think he's a fine value where he's priced on DraftKings. I think in the outright market, you've probably lost the value at that price right now. But I mean, there are a handful of things. Like, my model doesn't love him, and there's only been a couple times we can pull from, but doesn't love him overall on Fast Poa. He's had some times where it has worked, which would be kind of where you're talking about, where putts are dropping from everywhere. But I think that's more of an outlier, aberrational thing, to where if you remove some of those, all of a sudden it doesn't love him as much. It doesn't necessarily love some of the scoring that it has for him on these average to hard scoring venues. It didn't like his weighted strokes gain total on Fast Poa that I talked about. The weighted short game, whether that's putting from 5 to 10 feet or the sand save percentage, I think there are concerns about him here. Not so much so to where I have removed him yet from the equation on DraftKings, but I think at the price that we have to pay in the outright market, he has too many negative trajectories inside of my model for a lot of those upside metrics that I'm looking for. And I don't want to see that for a golfer that I'm paying 20-1 for when there's really a downside there that comes into play. Like if I'm going to use him, I would like to see where the ownership is. And it looks like right now, I agree, he's going to be ultra popular. If he's ultra popular, I'll let him beat me this week, even though I love him as a talent. I just don't know if this is the spot I want to go as overweight as the field is going to go on him. With like a super popular Oberg feels not like the right move when there's pivot spots around there.
Yeah. I think call it what? 400 to 1 for I don't even know if I'd bet it for a 41 top 5 on him either. Like it's just, I'm cool. Just wait and see. I think that's totally fine. If he kicks Scotty's butt, I'll just be licking my wounds here next week this time. So that's how it goes. Guess what? Doesn't matter, because next week we try again, and that's just how it goes. So it's just trying to optimize each different week and see where the world takes you. So that's going to be how it works. Jordan Spieth continues to break the hearts of those around him. He was looking like the magic bean stalk was going to go through the clouds, and then all of a sudden some giant worm came and gobbled it up, and it was gone. So that's Spieth's problem. We'll leave him alone for now unless you have anything to say about him. Someone that really intrigues me is Tony Finau this week, Spencer. After I know you like your boy Tony, and I'm kind of into the mood for him too. Going back to what I said about Scotty is the fact that this tee to green golf course can really reward these guys with these tee to green like elite levels of play. Tony Finau has been hitting his irons so freaking well. He just can't get the putter to click right now. And I think, would you say that like average putt at this venue for birdie or so is a little further than most places because of the difficulty of the nuances of the greens and the slopes and things? I think getting a dead stiff is tricky, which for Scotty and Tony is a difficult range for them compared to the rest of the field. I think they prefer those little lengthier 10 to 15 footer putts, which are not nearly as reliant on like your putting stroke versus like just getting the ball in the hole kind of thing. So we'll see what happens in that department. I'm not going to be playing Tony Finau for an outright, but I'll definitely be playing him in DFS.
I think he's a great DFS play. I do want to note that out of 70 players, he is 70th in my model in strokes gained putting over his last 24 rounds. Not necessarily what you want to see, but I think for an upside answer in GPP contest, if everybody wants to go the other way because of this putting stroke that we've seen, I've said this a million times. The golfer that ends up winning, that seemingly comes out of nowhere, is always the one that's ball striking the hell out of the ball, who gets the putter to work a little bit better on the 1 week. Finau fits that narrative to a T this week. And it's going to be painful if he wins. I feel like I've had an outright on him pretty much every single event. I think it's a nice tournament for him. Don't love the price though, I guess. Like, I would rather move up a little bit on the board, whether that's like a Scotty ticket like you played or the Hovland Cantlay route. That seemed a little bit more conducive to actually when we're talking about win equity here, but great GPP play. I have not seen a price for him yet as like a top 10 bet, but I think he fits that sort of a mold very well also.
Yeah, Tony's plus 280 for a top 10. I don't know how thrilled I am about that, but maybe
not
plus 115 for a top 20, maybe. Seems like the ball striking, you can lose a million strokes putting and still finish inside the top 20 the way Tony Finau can hit the ball. So I don't know. We'll have to take a look there. Some other names that I'm a little bit more interested in down in the 8s, and I'll even mention that I have an outright on Adam Scott. I know that I'm a little over leveraged this week, but I'm still sitting north of 6 to 1 on return there. I didn't go all the way to 7 last week anyway, so I've got a bit of free cash to play with in that department. And I got Adam Scott. I dropped that in the Discord this morning at 40 to 1 over at BetMGM. So if you guys are interested in jumping into the Discord, getting all our stuff from me and Spencer and Joe and the rest of the gang, getting all our premium articles, getting all of our tools, our research station, our optimizers, all that jazz, use code NEW. That's still out there. We're getting tons of people signing up with that code now. So we kind of just letting the people use it, because we love you guys coming on board. So 30% off with code NEW, NEW, get you right in the mix there. You can use that and just buy the closing line value you get versus having to bet. If you follow my article, you're going to be betting more in general because that's just how the market's moving. Monday mornings versus Wednesday afternoons, Wednesday mornings aren't the same. Odds-wise, you're going to be losing. I think I checked it out last year. The Monday morning bets I was making could be at 10 times return. And then by the time I wrote my article, it got to 8.
Yeah.
So you're basically just losing 2 events worth of like leverage on your bets by betting it later, So getting in on those early odds is very important. So just putting that out there. I love Adam Scott. I think he's been playing good golf. He's going to a golf course that he plays well at. I think 40-1 was a very fair number. When I saw that, I was only just going to bet Scotty, but then I went with another Scott as well. I went with a double Scott, and that's how we're going to roll this week. So we'll see what happens. Tell me about Adam Scott, Spence, if you like it or not.
Market loves him. I mean, you talked about that number moving. Like, to me, I think that's credible, sharp movement. That's moved that line. That seems to be one of those things that's come into play. And one of the ways I look to kind of gauge if I think it's sharp or square on the movement there is with some of the matchups at the books that I respect. And he's become a massive favorite against any single name that I'm looking for. There are some options against like a Sung J M where I'm lower on Sung J M than I guess the whole industry seems to be lower on him, but that doesn't mean as much to me when he stretches out to -130. But there were a lot of situations where he's a pretty substantial favorite against golfers that I kind of liked in the week. So for me, I would say I probably like him better in safety markets than upside markets. My model very well may have him higher than what yours did. I don't know what you have him ranked on yours.
I've got him like 6th.
So you have a little bit. I have him 9th. I have him 4th for safety. I have him 18th for upside. I think that upside number was the only concern that kind of came into play when we're talking outright bets, but he's going to be very popular on DraftKings for a very good reason. This is a course that has historically suited his game. And when we look at the Kikuyu rough that we keep talking about, that's something that a lot of these Australian players grow up with. So that's an advantage that, he has. And then whatever we want to call him, whatever my relationship was with him.
Your ex-boyfriend?
Yeah, we can call him that, I guess. I don't want Wyndham to hear that on his show. But yeah, I mean, guys like him have found success. And it's the thing with, you're a former lover of Cameron Smith. Like, it's unfortunate we don't have Cameron Smith here this week.
Dude, it seems like, it is what it is. I did a pod with PGA TOUR earlier. I did my Wednesday show today because of Valentine's Day. And we spoke about Cam Smith a little bit. So I've had my fix for the day. I do think that, like my new little lover is Bezzy. He kind of let us down last week for a top 20, but also Kikuyu grass in South Africa is very prominent. It's spongy, it's sticky, it's grippy. It takes a bit of a technique off that surface. And he's won multiple events down in South Africa on that surface. So I would not be surprised to see him do well here, especially his ball striking has been really good. He just has this like random splotch of 9 holes or so where he like brain farts. But the rest of the time, like if you take a look what he got up to on Sunday, he went full on psycho mode. Just birdies, bogeys, just nonstop. Just fell shy of a top 20 for me there, plus like 300. So we'll go back to him this week. I kind of like him a lot from a safety perspective, like a top 20 bet. I don't see him like cracking the top 10 a much, but just to get back to Adam Scott, Spencer, I know this is a really random back and forth situation, but I've been doing this thing where I have pulled all the bets for the last year, and I do like a rolling thing, which I'll be putting in my PGA Stat Buffet article, which you can get as a premium subscriber over at RotoBaller. Use code NEW for 30% off. You can see, and I went with Adam Scott for top 10 instead of a top 20 because his top 10 percentage versus his top 20 percentage was only a 3% difference. So when he pops, he just pops all the way. And he finished T8 last week. Thank God. It took a bit of heroics on Sunday, but he got there. That's what he does. So we'll see what he can get up to. And I think betting him for top 10 versus top 20 is like, we spoke about this with Joseph Bramlett. Remember when we said, do we want to go top 20 or top 40 with him because of the total difference in value that you're getting, because you limit your exposure by going with less investment to return the same amount and you get a bigger number. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Scott. But he, to me, when someone's showing great form entering a golf course that they've played well at in the past, that's when course history starts screaming my name. Like I scream Cameron Smith in the middle of the night sometimes. That's just the situation I want to find myself in when I'm betting a golfer.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it goes back to the discussion that we had at the beginning of the show. It's you have course history, you have the statistical data that places him inside the top 20 of my model. You have the current form that's trending in the right direction. He takes a significant jump when I ran it for Riviera Country Club from a tee to green perspective versus his baseline at other courses. He went from like 30th in expectation to 11th for me. When all those pieces work together, that's where you find the value. And I think he's going to be very popular in this sort of a contest, but like not everybody out there plays 2-pick one and done contests, but I do know that there are people. I write an article for RotoBaller where you can find that. And I think Adam Scott is one of those prototypical second picks that makes a ton of sense here. If you want to shoot for, what I seem to be a little bit more upset, I think there's other routes to go, but look, Adam Scott started, as you said, at 40-1, and now I don't know what the best price you can get in the market is right now. I mean, I saw FanDuel at one point. I think it was FanDuel. I don't want to start throwing books under the bus that it's not, but I think it was FanDuel. They pulled him off the board entirely for a while because they were getting so many bets.
Okay, FanDuel, I see you, baby. Yeah, he's 33 at BetMGM still. So they dropped him by 7 points, but that's still a significant drop if you think about it. That's the book that offered the highest number. So they must not have caught that much steam if they're still hanging at 33 on him.
How much lower can you theoretically get, though, is the question. Like, no matter how much you may like him or the public or sharp bettors, whatever we want to call it, may like them, like, how low can we really go on that Adam Scott number would be my only rebuttal to that.
Yeah.
Like, I 33 is low. Like, that's a significant – for him to open at 40 and get pushed down to 33 – that's a significant move. Like, that's a respectable move. Maybe he drops another point or two, but I can't imagine we're looking at much more of a movement here.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, because there's like a massive gap here. Like, DraftKings has got him at 25-1, which is – and it's like a quarter of his price tag that they have difference there. It's just incredible. So we'll see what cooks in that department. I know that we did a little segment for the MSN people, so let's do that now. We got Sam Burns, Spence at $8,700, and let's go with Adam Scott at $8,200. I'm trying to find two guys in the 8K range. If you think of someone that's going to catch a little bit more steam than those two in the 8s here, let me know. But let's do like the chalk fight, the Mortal Kombat situation here for those two guys. Let me know who you would lean towards if you were to have to back one of them. Not that you have to play them this week, but if you were to choose between Adam Scott at a casual $8,200 or Sam Burns at $8,700, where would you go?
I think so last week when we had this discussion, I think we both came to an agreement that, granted, neither one necessarily produced, but at least one made the cut while JT Poston didn't. And I think we were both in agreement that JT Poston was kind of the bad chalk that was going to implode on itself. And surprisingly, it really came from the putter. He played phenomenally well. Like that shouldn't have been the performance that we had gotten from him. So
it was one of his worst putting performances. I think it was like his worst since 2017 that I can look at by almost a stroke, Spencer. Yeah. What are the chances that just happens? You just roll out your worst putting performance. But anyway, total tangent there. Back to the order of business here.
I think to answer the question, and I give this answer for one reason specifically. And I think I know there's a cut, but to me, this is kind of like fringe no cut. You're within 10 of the lead. It's top 50 in ties. Like if you're outside of the 10 strokes of the lead, you've really made a mess of this. And that's going to be like the Chase Johnsons of the world that are probably going to struggle there. So you're probably not going to lose more than, I don't know, 7 to 15 players. I mean, would you say that that's probably correct?
Yeah.
Maybe 7's too low, but
the thing is, though, we've seen these guys get off to like these fast starts. Maybe someone just gets to like 9 under par quick, and then gets stuck there. And then the field catches up. So I don't know. The 10 shot rule is very interesting.
Well, sure, but I mean, you're already locked into at least 50, so you're only losing 20 at the very max if everything went wrong there.
Yeah.
You'd have to think that there's some ties that are going to come into play, but
exactly.
I guess for me, the only reason why I give the answer of Sam Burns, because my model would say Adam Scott. I think if you had a true 72 hole tournament where there's going to be a 36 hole cut with 156 players and we're cutting it down to 65. I think Scott is a lot safer. I kind of tend to think with the form that Burns has right now that the upside is a little bit better. So I guess I'd rather shoot for the Burns upside, which at a number that I could be wrong here. We'll see where the ownership goes. I think it's going to be less ownership. My early guess would be that Adam Scott is probably going to be maybe I guess one of the three most owned golfers. I don't want to say he's going to be the most. I think I think Oberg's going to be very popular. I think Sahith is going to be very popular. I think there's a lot of names in that like $8,000 to $9,000 range that's going to catch some steam this week.
Yeah, I think so too, because Sahith also has that good finish here last year. I think he finished T7 or T5 or something like that. Cameron Young as well, sitting in the top of that range. It's going to be really interesting now that he's shown a bit of form again. He's come back from the broken dead. We'll see what he can get up to. What does a name like, I know Ian made me play him last week, but Tom Kim at a golf course like this, showing a bit more zest after making the cut last week. Nothing spectacular, finished inside the top 20.
Hot run on the weekend though that got him. Like he should have missed the cut. So sometimes, like historically, if you look at these players where they get themselves into the weekend off of a performance where they shouldn't have made the weekend, and then now they've picked up some form, they can get hot during the next event and roll over where they were. I think that's, like, to me, if we're looking in probably specifically with this being a 70-man contest, why the question even to begin with of Burns versus Scott is so difficult for me to answer, because I would so much rather pivot in these spots. Like, I would pivot and rather consider a guy like Tom Kim. I would pivot and rather consider an option like Tommy Fleetwood that my model really liked this week. So I think you're going to have to get unique and different, just because in a 70-man field, there's only, whether that's leaving a lot of money on the table or really picking some of these leverage spots apart, ownership's going to condense in all the same areas, and that's at least worth noting. So I'm more about trying to find value in that direction where I can, whether that is with, I think Tom Kim is much more boom or bust than like a Tommy Fleetwood would be, but the ceiling's there that he can produce. I don't have a problem with anybody that wants to go back to him at like sub 8%. Yeah.
It's interesting for him, dude. He's a very good iron. Like, I saw him miss an eagle putt that was like 5 feet on 15. Right before he walked into I was like, oh, let's go. And then Hideki Matsuyama chipped in for his like 15th eagle of the week. So that's what you're just going to get from Hideki. So let's speak about Hideki. He's down here at $7,400, my nemesis. We've got Hideki Matsuyama and Benny On. To me, they seem like they're two very similar golfers in a way. Benny On with a bit of a better putter situation, no raucous fans to really derail his round, because he had that 1-9 where he just kind of completely lost the plot, and I think guys were yelling at him mid-swing and stuff like that on not even the 16th hole. So it is what it is. I think that's what Myron was getting at earlier. Whereas Hideki, a bit better of an iron player, but the putter can come and go. Obviously a phenomenal scrambler. The guy can chip in from his mom's backyard if he wanted to, but I'm curious as to which of those two guys you kind of would have to lean towards if I had to make you choose between the two of them.
I'll go with Ben On. I think this is probably your correct, like outside of where Hideki has performed so well in the past at the Phoenix Open, this is probably a better course for him. I always say anytime that you give him the ability where the winning score gets more or not as high and there's not as many birdies made, that's kind of where he finds more success. But I would rather play Ben On than him. I'd probably rather play Siwoo Kim. I think it's a nice spot to consider going back to Siwoo again. Had an outright on him last week. I like this tournament. I'd probably rather, even if push came to shove, play Bo Hostler than Hideki. So
Bo Hostler does the other thing. He'll be like 40 spots away from Hideki going into the weekend, and then they'll like do the switcheroo where Bo just comes storming up the leaderboard, and then Hideki starts stumbling down the board. So yeah, what about Bo's intriguing to you?
Just from a statistical data point, if you look at where he was as a player at this point last year, and that's been specifically one of the things I've been running with him over and over again, is kind of where my baseline projection had him, 12 months ago, 15 months ago, kind of the latest. I'm dating it back to where it has him now. He's skyrocketing in so many of the key metrics, what I'm looking for. He's longer off the tee. The proximity numbers are now looking better. This is a golfer that in almost every single field that I ran him for was dead last in expected proximity. I run things from too long of a perspective, so he still gets hurt a little bit from the overall grade. I go through by hand and I make some of those changes and I run it from more of a recent perspective for him. But even without going over the top with that answer, my model still thinks he's a top 25 player here for this event down at 7,000. And if I ran things over only like the last 3 or 4 months, it would push him even higher than that. And I kind of just tend to think that the public and sports books and I guess DraftKings pricing in this particular situation hasn't necessarily caught up to the immense upside that he has. It's the same example that I've given a million times of, to me, he feels like this year's version of like a Wyndham Clark. I don't know if that ends up becoming elevated event wins or a major championship. Like that's really pushing the envelope. And Wyndham Clark, if you play that season out for him, you know, for where he was at the beginning of the year 100 times, maybe that's the 1 out of 100 that he hits. And then all of a sudden he propels himself to this level. Hostler's going to need to catch some breaks like any golfer who wants to win a contest here. But I just think he's too talented a golfer to be down in this price. And I would make an argument, Byron, that I think like you mentioned Bezadenhout, I'll mention Hostler. I'll throw out Hoagie as another example. There are some really intriguing names down here, like at the sub $7,000 range that fit into lineups really well because of the upside that they do possess.
Yeah. I will get into these guys now with you, but I want to make sure that some people, a little trick that I've learned since doing this stuff now is unless your name's Tom Hoagie or Eric Cole, the last 24 rounds of golf you've played will span back at least probably a third to a quarter to maybe even a half, depending on how many tournaments you played this year, into 2023 still. And that's like, for some guys, still a long few months away, like 3-4 months away. Those two guys are the only two guys that played all 6 tournaments. So that's kind of bizarre. Now they're going again. It just doesn't make sense to me. But what you want to do is, if you can, run your data from January 1st, see what the guys have done this year versus not the last 24 rounds. And just sometimes after these breaks, these guys have done some work in the off season, and you can see Bo Hostler, guys like that, Bezzy in particular, like he's coming with his irons and just been firing. So it's really important to make sure you can split your sample sizes and your data pools into a time frame versus a number frame. Just a little fun fact on how to manipulate some data to your advantage out there.
Well, this actually came up. I don't know if you saw this on Twitter. I don't even remember what player it was for right now. It might have been Morikawa, but it was somebody was trying to figure out in extreme wind conditions where Colin Morikawa ranked in there, and he pushed it back to like the last 50 rounds. And the last 50 rounds took him in those sort of conditions like 2018.
Yeah,
like you're not necessarily at that point pulling the exact sample size that you think you are. 50 rounds doesn't seem like a lot, but when you consider that like extreme wind, it's only coming here and there. And that's like the whole sample size he has of, you know, there's 46 rounds he had on record. He didn't even have a full 50 to be pulling from it. So it's an interesting point that you bring up there when you look at sample sizes. And that's one of the things that you just have to be cognizant of when you're running a number, because you can run data, but just because you're running data, you can either one, be trying to fit a narrative that kind of is a preconceived narrative that you have, or two, you're building something that you don't even realize what you're building. And you think you're looking for, as you said, like you may think you're looking back to January 1st, but you're really looking back to July of last year or August of last year, or whatever it ends up being. And that's the tricky part with the numbers here. And
what's even worse is we've come through California, which was the Amex, which only had 2 rounds of golf off ShotLink. Then you had 3 rounds of golf at the Farmers. Then you had Pebble, which only had 2 rounds of ShotLink because one of the 3 rounds wasn't even there. So out of all 3 of those tournaments, you're only getting, if they played all of them, 7.
Well, and depending on where you're pulling your numbers from, and I mean, this is a problem that I guess I have with the PGA Tour pulling it from there. I'm not even so sure the American Express ever was a counting tournament on their numbers. So even though there were a couple of rounds that counted, you don't even see it in the mathematical data that comes into play there. So, it's a very noteworthy thing at the end of the day. And like a guy like, I just finally saw him dip in my model over what's been produced recently, Grayson Murray. It didn't have that American Express result for him. And my model didn't realize he missed the cut. And that's the unfortunate thing with some of these data providers at this point. We've been late to the party, and I don't understand how we are the PGA Tour and we cannot get ShotLink and a shot tracker on every single course, even if you're playing 100 courses that day. How can we not get that?
Especially for designated events where your best golfers are playing. Like, how people are infatuated about this information, and we track this stuff. But I guess what they do is, I learned this on Saturday. I know we're taking a bit of a tangent here, but they were just showing the 16th hole on Saturday, which to me was fine. Like, I was kind of just trying to chill out from the tournament, and I enjoyed that production. But then they went back on Sunday and showed every shot of the leaders. But we were missing so many shots of the leaders because they were just showing one thing that I think 95 to 90% probably of people that watch golf really care about.
We're in the 1%.
Like the hardos. Yeah,
exactly. We're in the 1 or 2% that I think anybody who tunes into the show or anybody who's really into the betting or the DraftKings, the DFS side of the equation, you care about something completely different than what the casual viewer that's been watching golf for 40 years that's going to tune in, or even still, I think the WM Phoenix Open is a really prime example of, they're appealing to the younger generation that maybe doesn't even love golf, but just knows that there's a party on that hole and they want to see the chaos that ensues. Yes. And it's an interesting way to try to bring new fans into the game. I'm not going to fault them for trying something different there, but for somebody like yourself or somebody like myself, that's not what I'm trying to see. I don't care unless I have bets on how somebody's going to perform on 16, I want to see the shots that matter to where there's actual real money that's in play here for me. So
I'm with you, but I understood it. I think that's the thing, that at the end of the day, we can't. I'd pay double, I'd pay triple just to get better coverage, for ESPN Plus and stuff, but it is what it is. Speaking about chaos and speaking about a party, Kevin Yu, Spencer, was cruising and then just had a complete meltdown on one of his rounds. I was looking at his stuff and I was like, bro, what are you doing? So let's chat about Kevin Yu. Let's chat about Mackenzie Hughes in this matchup that I have for you. Yeah, both at $6,300. One, if you could build two golfers from perfect stats and strokes gained, this would be a good Frankenstein if you put these two together. Go ahead. Tell me what you like.
I have a problem with Kevin Yu. My model always likes Kevin Yu more than a lot of people. I put it in perspective, I guess. I'll just go from an overall rank. Kevin Yu's 44th. Mackenzie Hughes is 68th. So I am much lower on Mackenzie Hughes than I'm going to assume you are based off of that question.
Correct. I have you a little higher than quite a lot higher than Mackenzie Hughes too, but I'm getting a gut maniac tingling about Mackenzie Hughes at a golf course like this, where
good on fast power.
Fast power, strokes gained around the greens, where you can chip stuff in and scramble for pars. He's not the most accurate driver of the golf ball, but I think he's been working on his distance a little bit. Whereas Kevin Yu, comparing him to Kevin Yu is a nightmare, because Kevin Yu off the tee is a freak. He's a freak off the tee. And that's exactly what this golf course demands from you. But when he gets around the greens, it's just that gif where the guy's walking out with his soap bucket and sponges and just falls onto the hood of his car and just sprays himself with a hose pipe, because that's exactly what Kevin Yu is on the greens. We got a bit of good breaks early in the year, and I think we're chasing that. I'm kind of curious if Kevin Yu, for instance, rolls in at $6,300, and do you think he pushes 8% because of his ball striking at this golf course? I don't know.
That sounds gross. If he gets up into that territory, he's probably a fade at that point. But the short game in general, whether it's, any of the short game portions, there are concerns at this venue. I think it's a very volatile matchup between the two. If you want to make a little friendly wager or a wager on this, I will take the Kevin Yu side for for the show, we can make it our first bet that we've had on it. But
I keep getting pulled into these situations where I like give me Hideki Matsuyama bets. I think that's my bread and butter these days. I like this as an interesting like DFS situation because I think Mackenzie is going to be a quarter or a fifth of what Hugh comes in at.
100%.
So that's more so why I like that. But I'll go with this and say, give me Nick Hardy versus Kevin Yu as a friendly wager.
I mean, to me, it's a coin flip between those two. I don't have a massive stance one way or another.
Yeah.
I would probably lean towards you having the right side there just because I trust Hardy's floor more than whatever we're going to get from Kevin Yu.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go, though, is that's a good point. I think if you were to bet Kevin Yu, are you trying to bet him top 10 at plus 1,100, or do you want to bet Kevin Yu at top 20 plus 360?
I would probably with Kevin Yu. When I have these numbers in my model where it's massive, and massive may be an overblown thing. He's 33rd in my model for upside, but to me, that's massive upside compared to where I have him. And then this very low floor, I usually try to shoot things a little bit higher just to limit the exposure. I don't know if you've run numbers on Kevin Yu. We don't have a ton of tournaments to pull from him to begin with to where if he's been historically better as a top 10 or 20, but I mean, like the blow up potential, like all I can think of is that he's 6th place going into Sunday. And this feels like we don't even need to get to the 18th hole for me to lose that bet at that point. That's going to end up being like, he'll shoot an 81 and all of a sudden I'm just out of there.
Yeah, no, he doesn't leave anything on the table. He lets you know he's up front. He'll let you know if he's going to ball out or not. So I think from last week, I remember betting him top 10 instead of a top 20 because I feel like I remember the numbers telling me he's a better upside candidate.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. Let's take a peek at some other guys that are also down here in the bottom, like Sam Ryder, obviously at $6,000 flat. I'm so sad that Jake Knapp got knocked out of this event by Charlie Hoffman or whatever. This golf course would have been really fun to watch Jake Knapp play golf at.
You hit that on the head with Jake Knapp. You were kind of the first one like weeks and weeks ago that was pushing that narrative inside the RotoBaller chat with him. And he is supremely talented. He's going to be a lot of fun to watch this year.
Yeah. He finished, I think, 28th. I had him at plus 500 for a top 20 last week. Just a few guys just missing out. And he was inside the top 20, the majority. I think he fell from top 20 out on Sunday, just couldn't make a birdie on Sunday. So that was a sad situation. That would have been a really nice hit for us. So I would have gone back to, but it's no point speaking about guys that aren't in the tournament. So any other guys in the 6K range, Spence, that you kind of got your eye on?
No, not really. We've touched on most of them. Like I like Hoagie. I like your Bezaden Hout call. I do think Kevin Yu is interesting, just depending on wherever that ownership comes in. I agree. If he comes in at like 8 to 12%, I'll look a different direction with him. But I do think there's upside. I want to point that out at least. It'll take the right build with him.
Yeah.
Other than that, not really, to be honest. Like Sam Ryder is too cheap, I think, at 6,000, but the recent form has not necessarily been what you want to see to start this year. For me, a lot of these names outside of Nick Hardy at 6,100, who you already brought up, this is essentially every single golfer that's outside of like 60 to 70 in my model. This is this entire range.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And these are the guys that are, this is the thing is I think if you can find a few, especially with the cut being just these 20 guys or 15, 10 guys, people aren't going to want to play these 6K options because they're scared. It's just me brainstorming some game theory out here. You'd imagine we start leaning a bit more towards balance builds to just try and ensure that these guys make the cut to a degree, or do you think there's risk or reward in the pie here at the bottom where these cheaper guys are that potentially could miss the cut?
This is just from like a public narrative that I always hear, and maybe it's changed over the last little bit. I always hear like quote unquote no cut or some of these limited fields. And the number one thing I see on Twitter is everybody wants to take that boomer bust route to where they stack the top and take a bunch of names at the bottom. My one concern there is I do think you lose so much of that top 10 equity in the $6,000 range that to me, that's not the optimal build. Yes, you may be able to not lose any players going that route, but whatever the players, I don't even want to name anybody. And I do think there are playable commodities. Like it's the names that we've talked about are names that I will have in builds this week, but I don't think a guy finishing in 46th place helps you at all. Like I would still rather try to find the upside and what's the optimal game theory route to take here. And to me, I don't think the optimal game theory route is playing two $6,000 golfers. Probably the lowest I would want to go if I was going to even go down there, and I think this is way pushing it, would be a guy like Hostler at 7,000 paired with a guy like Hoagie. I think you can find some upside in a lineup like that, or Bezadenhout. We can throw like him into the mix there, but going lower than that just feels like a negative EV situation that's playing out, just because hitting one of them is hard enough. Hitting both of them in the same build, it's just not going to happen, and you're just losing equity by making builds like that. So I guess if that means that I'm a little bit more like flat on builds than most people, I guess that would be my answer. But I don't necessarily look at it as being flat. It's just I know that people like to stack the top and take shots at the bottom.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the fact that you're going flat doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be playing chalk. Like we've identified multiple pivot options down in that mid range that you can absolutely go. Our main man, Brian says, why is Ryder min price? People, I don't know. Like if you take a look at his odds, this is the same people that put his odds together. We got Chase Johnson at 2,500 to 1 to win the tournament.
Yeah.
And he's the same price as Sam Ryder. Grayson Murray, 6,100. I mean, I don't know.
In reality, based off of that pricing, Chase Johnson should have been his own play at 6,000. Yes. And probably the next lowest option should have been like 63. You shouldn't have even had a bottom of this board and kind of like really put people in a bind to make a decision in these spots. Is there anybody based off of that question, let's say at 6,300 or less, that
Charlie Hoffman is super intriguing to me, because this is not number related at all, Spencer. It's completely just based off of the fact that he's played well last week at a golf course he's played well at. I don't have his Riviera numbers in front of me right now, but what I do know is he's played well at Augusta, which to me is another golf course that kind of relates well. And he's $6,200. Like, would it be that shocking to see Charlie Hoffman flirting with the top 10 again, or top 20 a week after he's just played his amazing golf at Waste Management?
No, I don't think anything is necessarily a shocking result. If we're looking at names down there, I prefer him to the Lee Hodges of the world and a lot of those names. I do think, though, I would probably rather have Nick Hardy, to go back to that answer. I want to throw out a name for you before we wrap this out that I'm curious about.
Yeah.
Kuchar?
No. I feel like I'm the Kuchar whisperer, because I had him dialed in last year, this time. Going into this event, I had Kuchar in lineups. I had him in bets. It was because he was playing well. Going to courses he was playing well at. He's got great course history and stuff. Just he hasn't brought it yet. He hasn't brought it this year, and I don't know what's the deal. So I need to see a little bit of form from him before I go to him at courses he's played well at. Like we wrapping around back to what we spoke about at the beginning.
Well, there's also a possibility that he may be a little bit more popular than you would think he is, just because of that course history, and then that just removes him from the equation altogether. Like I don't want a golfer that's in this price range over 5% owned, who is bringing terrible form into the mix just because of the course history answer. And that's the Max Homa thing, if we circle back to that narrative there. So I think, as always, the true answer for any of these questions comes down to ownership at the right percentage in theory, and at the right price in theory. Everybody is under consideration. It's just some things become more under consideration. Like if you could promise me that, I'm the only person that has Matt Kuchar in any single contest that I was going to make, I'll take Matt Kuchar and shoot for the upside there. But if all of a sudden, we're talking about him at 7%, it's a lot less enticing in that direction.
Exactly. And he's sitting at 150 to 1 to win the tournament. So it's not like he's completely off people's radar. There's other names that are longer than him too. So we'll have to see. And like you said, that course history is interesting, but I've always pronounced play Matt Kuchar at Kuchar courses, but that's only when Kuchar's playing Kuchar-Ku, like Gucci. So cool. Friends, thanks for showing up. Thanks for the RotoBaller PGA show. Use code NEW, 30% off. We've got all the stuff you guys need out there. Got everything. Got optimizers, got research, like our little research station. It's not like top tier stuff, but there's tons and tons of people in there when I'm going, and it's a really interesting situation. You got all these different showdown, especially this week when I was unable to really provide any sort of information to people mid-tournament. There's showdown information in that sheet at the research station that you can really use. So it's been very beneficial to our guys. So
the research station's really interesting at RotoBaller, because I think if you look into why people like to sign up for RotoBaller, I would say the research station is like outside of the top 10 reasons, but it's a nice little tool to look into. I agree with you on that. There's some interesting tidbits to find in there that go along with all of your articles and my articles and both Joe's articles. Like there's a lot of information, a lot of models to be found.
So many models. We've got them all. And that's the fun part about RotoBaller's experiences. We got models for freaking everything, friends. Like if you want showdown, if you want mid-tournament, you want, pre-tournament, you want whatever, we've got it for you. Me and Spencer can build these things. We have them. They're not these perfectly websited situation things, but we can give you exactly what you need over here at RotoBaller.com.
I mean, at the end of the day, the answer, no matter what you're looking at, is to find winners and to win money. Like, I think that's something that we do very well out there. And, Alex and Lior are the owners of RotoBaller, for anybody who doesn't know that. How mad would you be, Byron, if I got them to trademark like Model Maniac as part of their hashtag thing for all the models that we have there, and we just hijack that from you underneath?
Well, we'd have to get into a Zoom call and I'll get my lawyer involved. Yet to be determined who that is, but it's we're doing good stuff over here at RotoBaller, Spence, and it's been a great year so far. We're going to be close again. Sahith Sam Burns last week. You had Ryder Wyndham Clark the week before that, so we're right in the mix there. It's about time.
I'll tell you this, there's just I'm not going this route, but there was a non-zero chance probably like 6 months ago that I was going to go to law school with it. That would be the ultimate twist on this. If I opened up this can of worms and then I became your lawyer on top of it to make the money, like if that's not masterminding the situation, I don't know what is.
I'll handle the books and accounting. You can be the lawyer. And then we just completely boycott RotoBaller. But till then, we're going to stick around RotoBaller. You guys should too. This took a complete turn, as it always does with me and Spencer once that hour mark kicks in. Spence, thank you.
Thank you, Byron. Show. Yes.
Who's your one guy? Who's going to win this thing this week?
I think the right answer is probably Scotty Scheffler. I'm going to say Victor Hovland wins this golf tournament. I don't think that the concerns around him are quite as intense as people seem to believe.
I like it. I think he's going to be sneaky as well. I'll be playing him in DFS for sure. All right, folks, don't forget to use code NEW for 30% off. We'll catch you guys here next week, Monday at 9:30 Eastern. I don't know the days, but you'll always see it on Twitter. You'll always see us posting it there on the YouTube channel. We're back on the RotoBaller channel now, and we're rocking hard. We're rocking steady. So we'll catch you guys next week.